Hey, welcome to our discussion on Chapter 1 of the OpenStax textbook. This is Psychology 101, and I want to just have you think about a couple things as we get started. First of all, on any of these video presentations that I will be recording for you, feel free to watch them more than once, and also please, on certain types of topics or discussions or something, pause the video so you can take notes or become, just generally a little more acquainted with the information. And so this is Chapter 1. And Chapter 1, we're going to talk briefly about basically the history of the development of psychology. So what is psychology? How did it develop? Who were some of the key players in that development? Questions like those. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, what is psychology? So psychology is, right here I put psychology is or equals the scientific study of mental processes and behavior. So what's important is as I put the important terms, either underline them or put them in red. And you can see right here in red, I highlighted the term scientific. So that's what's important to understand. Psychology is a science, and it uses the scientific method, which we will discuss a little bit later as we proceed. So that is the formal definition of psychology, the scientific study of mental processes and behavior. So first of all, let's start taking a look at some of the key players in the development of psychology. And most people are surprised to learn that actually philosophers actually began sort of the development of psychology, the study of psychology. And the first person we'll look at here is Aristotle. Now, you don't have to memorize the years. Please do not, worry about memorizing the years. This isn't that type of course. This is just, I want you to just sort of memorize and be familiar with some of the key players. So first of all, Aristotle. He was a Greek philosopher. And so he, used logic. Okay. And you notice I did put that in red. And he combined that with empirical observations. So empirical observations are the types of observations that are made that use evidence. That evidence is used to back up these observations. And so that's what the term empirical means. That means evidence-based. Okay. And the second person right here, I know a lot of you may not know how to pronounce this name. This person's name is René Descartes. He was the philosopher who was pretty much responsible for the term "I think, therefore I am." And so for those of you who have taken some philosophy or studied some, that may look familiar. So what Descartes was mostly known for in psychology and philosophy, but definitely psychology, is his doctrine of what's called interactive dualism. Now, interactive dualism is basically this, and I did put this below, that proposes that mind and body, they're separate entities, but they do interact to produce, sensations, emotions, and other conscious experiences, which is what psychology is concerned with. So interactive dualism, that was René Descartes. And moving forward here, we're going to take a look at this person right here, whose name was Wilhelm Wundt. That is German. That's why the W's are pronounced, we usually pronounce those as V's. Wilhelm Wundt. And so he was actually credited as being one of the founders of psychology. And he created the first psychology lab. That's what's important to know and to become familiar with is Wilhelm Wundt created the first psychology lab. And he was, pretty much credited with being, the, if not the, but one of the founders of psychology. So he said that psychology is the study of consciousness. You can see that I did put that in red there. And so that's what's important to know from this slide. The study of consciousness. That was Wilhelm Wundt. And so he also used experimental methods, in order to study that and measure that. In another chapter, we are going to look at that a little bit more in depth about what experimental methods really are. So just for this chapter, just know that Wilhelm Wundt was the first psychologist, or one of the first psychologists, and he was posited the psychology as the study of consciousness. Okay, moving forward. Now we have this, this person right here, Edward Titchener, or you could also call him Edvard Titchener. But he developed what's called structuralism. Okay, structuralism was more concerned with basically introspection and the study of basic components of our conscious experiences. So take, for example, let's just look at that. So introspection and basic components of conscious experience. So he would have people come into his lab and he would say, maybe hand them, let's just say a piece of fruit for our purposes here. And he would say, okay, so take for instance, he handed them an apple. He would say, okay, let's take apart, let's all the structures that are involved in your experience with this apples. So what color is it? How does it feel? How does it smell? How does it taste? Things like that. Those are all the basic structures or components of conscious experiences. So I hope that makes sense. Please feel free, like I said, to pause the video if you want to and think about this. So we're going to move forward here. We're almost done with all the key players here. So William James, what's important to know about this person, William James, he was the first American psychologist. Okay, so he developed what's called functionalism. That was his answer to structuralism. So he didn't exactly agree with Titchener's structuralism. So he developed what's called functionalism. And so because he was influenced greatly by Charles Darwin, the founder of evolution, or the major proponent of evolution, he was more concerned with how our behaviors and thinking help us adapt to our environments and to function well enough in order to survive. Hence the term functionalism. So I hope that makes sense. We're going to move ahead here. We're almost done with the key players. Okay, so Sigmund Freud. He was probably one of the most famous psychologists, and even these days, when students think about the new students to psychology, when they think about psychology, they'll usually think about like a client maybe stretched out on a couch while the psychologist sits in a chair with a notepad and asks them questions about their past, things like that. Well, that was actually developed by Sigmund Freud. Okay, he, as I said, he was highly influential, and so he challenged structuralism and functionalism, And he started the school of thought called psychoanalysis. So psychoanalysis was concerned with basically that people are influenced by what happened early in their lives or previously in their lives, and is affecting them subconsciously below their levels of consciousness. And so Freud said, okay, well, we have to analyze, we have to help get clients to dig in deep and bring up all of that stuff from their past. And that way we can analyze that and help them get past all that. So that was the school of thought known as psychoanalysis. Okay, so John Watson, he's the father of behaviorism within psychology. And behaviorism is basically concerned with one's behavior. So he proposed that psychology shouldn't even be concerned about mental processes. He said, look, we can't really observe that and record mental processes and things like that. So the only things that we can really observe are one's behaviors. Hence, his school called behaviorism. And that was pretty popular and is still a component of psychology. But in psychology and modern psychology, basically a little bit from all of these schools is combined, which we will discuss, and you will learn, as we progress through this course. Okay, so Pavlov, he was a physiologist, Ivan Pavlov. And he was best known as, he was also a behaviorist. And he was the one that conducted those experiments with dogs. And he would ring a bell as they would eat their dog food. And then, because they were salivating while they're eating the food, eventually they got to the point where they would salivate when they would just hear the bell and not even have to be concerned with the dog food or anything. So Ivan Pavlov was the experimenter or physiologist that did that. And that's all you have to know for this. We will look at this person and his methods in another chapter. Now, another famous researcher, in behaviorism was Skinner. And right here, I put this in red, Skinner. And that's really all you have to know, is just kind of roughly be aware of his name. We will take a look, possibly in another chapter, a little more in depth with him. Okay, now that gets us into more contemporary psychologists. And these two, Rogers and Maslow, they developed what's called humanistic psychology. And they kind of answered, because they felt that that psychology goes beyond just looking at behavior. And they said, look, behaviorism, that sort of kind of intimates that we humans, aren't in charge of our own lives, that everything is programmed, and, basically we are driven by instinct and genes and evolution and things. But these two researchers and psychologists, Rogers and Maslow, they said, look, we people, we have free wills, and we can come up with our own direction in life, our own purpose in life. We can be self-determined. We can say, look, things, are rough right now in life, but I can get past this and I can succeed. Well, it was these two gentlemen that were responsible for the development of that form of psychology known as humanistic psychology. Now, this person right here, I just want to show you Maslow. his theory of motivation, emphasized the importance of psychological growth. But he was really known for developing this, the hierarchy of needs. And some of you may have seen this before. But he, basically proposed that, look, we have all these levels right here of self-development. But in order to progress through and reach the top, how to become a self-actualized person, we actually have to progress and we have to meet the needs of each of these levels before we can get to the next. So take, for instance, we have physiological needs, which are food, water, shelter, warmth, etc. And we have to meet those before we can move on to the security needs, etc., etc. Now, the thing is, though, psychologists have determined that, look, life is a little more complex than this. And so we can actually be at various levels depending on the different types of things we're dealing with, the different topics that we're dealing with, or where we are at in life. Well, so we can be like, say, take for instance, we can have all of the physiological needs met, but we can skip and say, look, but also in the social life, social needs here, we're doing pretty good there too. And we're feeling good about ourselves and we have high self-esteem, but we might not be feeling, total security. We might not be meeting all the needs of security level, things like that. So, and these can actually change from day to day. So these are not set. One doesn't become, quote unquote, self-actualized and then stay there for our whole lives. So psychologists have determined that, look, this is a very fluid, malleable type process that we go through. All right, let's move on here. So the major perspectives in psychology are all these right here. Now, I'm not going to go through, all these in extreme detail, but, so some psychologists, they are more concerned about the biological perspective. But others might be more concerned with the psychodynamic perspective or the behavioral perspective, Now, others may be concerned with the humanistic perspective, etc., etc. Now, all of these here can be combined in any way, but these are all the major perspectives that are used, used in psychology and pursued in psychology. So just be, kind of aware of this, and that way, as we proceed through this course, through this semester, you will actually have a better of a foundational type knowledge and know how to interpret some of the incoming information. Okay, let's move forward here. So I give you just a few examples here, okay? So you remember in the previous frame, or a little bit early in the video, we said, I'll go ahead and go backward. All these major perspectives right here. So the first one here is biological perspective. So on this here, we can say, well, biological psychologists, they're more concerned with the structure and function of the human nervous system and how that affects our behavior. Now, you don't have to memorize all this right now. This will probably be in chapters 2 or 3. I can't remember exactly, but it's coming up with our on our chapter on biopsychology. Okay. And now other psychologists might be concerned with more like, like this, what's known as the 5-factor model. Now, you don't have to memorize this. I just want you to be aware of this. Just be kind of familiar with this, but, some psychologists will, tend to work with clients and say, look, and they'll look at them and they'll look at where they're at. Are they neurotic? Are they agreeable? Are they extroverted? Blah, blah, blah. But if they score really low, they might be along this column right here. But if they score really high, in each of these topics or categories, then they might be, definitely, look at it from this perspective. I'm trying to keep this in a real simple way since this is our first, introductory chapter into psychology. Okay. Now, another thing psychologists, keep in mind, I'm just giving you some examples of things the psychologists might do or have done, but like take, for instance, this Stanley Milgram, he was interested in how far people will go in obeying orders from an authority figure. And so, I put in, like this advertisement right here. This was quite a while ago, like in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. This was research done at Yale University, and each person was paid basically $4 to participate in this experiment. But the thing is, he really wasn't. All he was concerned about is if people would obey orders from an authority figure. Let's move ahead here. Now, the biopsychosocial model, which is really popular, and a lot of psychologists actually use this term now, they combine all these, the biological, the psychological, and the social aspects of being. And that is hence the term biopsychosocial model. It suggests that our health and illness is determined by an interaction of these three factors. So that's an important term. And I will pretty much, throughout this semester, as we look at each chapter, you may actually hear me referring to the biopsychosocial model or perspective of pursuing each of those topics or chapters. So just be aware of that. Now, cognitive behavioral therapists, cognitive basically means mental processes. Cognition, mental processes. Now, behavioral, I think you know what that is. That's just how we act. Things we do, and, we can be observed, and our behavior can be observed, and we will act out in a certain way. But cognitive behavioral therapists, they would like to look at how each of those affects the others. And so this little diagram right here, this shows you basically, emotions, they can lead to changes in our thoughts. But also changes in our thoughts can lead to different types of emotions, etc., etc. That's why these arrows go both ways right here. Okay? So each of these can affect the other. I hope this is making sense, and this is giving you a good introduction to basically the different types of psychologists and maybe what they're concerned with. Now, here's a common question right here, and I wanted to include this in this chapter's discussion. So, what is the difference between psychologists and psychiatrists? Excuse me. So what's the difference between these two? Now, clinical psychologists, you remember, hence right here, I use the term psychologists. They usually have a PhD or PsyD, and PsyD is short for psychological doctorate. So basically, they are doctors, and they are basically concerned with diagnosing, treating, and figuring out the causes and prevention of psychological disorders. So that is the most common type of thing that everyone thinks of when they think of a psychologist. They usually think of a clinical psychologist that's taking on clients. They usually have a private practice, and they're helping people with issues. Now, the thing is psychiatrists, on the other hand, they are actually have graduated from medical school. They have medical degrees. And then they get specialized training in psychological disorders. And they can, admit clients to hospitals or subscribe medications and things like that, psychiatrists. But clinical psychologists, they may not be able to do that. So that is important to know. And hopefully that actually answered a question that some of you have had. What is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? So that concludes our discussion. So just wanted to assure you that if you keep up the good work, you're going to succeed. Just keep going from chapter to chapter. And also on this, I want to remind you that you can watch this video more than once, and in order to take notes and that kind of thing. And also in your textbook from chapter 1, please read that chapter now and start filling in some of the blanks now that I gave you a foundational type knowledge. So good luck, and I'll see you on the discussion of the next chapter.